Good evening, CUBE fam, and welcome back to Atlanta, Georgia. We're here at the end of day one of our 3 days of coverage at KubeCon. My name's Savannah Peterson. Delighted to be joined by three really fantastic analysts, more importantly, two of which are my friends. I feel like we just get to hang out. Ned, you're about to become my friend. Ned, welcome to the show, great to have you.
Thank you, future friends.
Yes, future friends.
Love to hear it, yes.
We've also got Joep and Rob, fan favorites, and we all got the purple memo today, which I secretly kind of love. It's conference colors, so it's fantastic. It's been a really exciting day one. There's allegedly over 9,000 people here. The conference center is buzzing. Ned, I'm going to open it up with you. What stood out with you since KubeCon kicked off the most?
Obviously the focus is artificial intelligence, AI, and how Kubernetes can accelerate and help in different dimensions. The one they chose to lead with was Inference, which I thought was interesting. Typically I would think of something consumer facing or something in the training models, but they were like, no, we want to talk about inference and how important it is. And I think it has something to do with the potential market for inference versus training. There's only a few companies that are going to do full training, but the number of companies that are going to need solid inference, that is huge.
It's everybody.
It's everybody.
I mean, yeah, if you're using AI, inference is what makes it real to the end consumer, to your point, or to the developer, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, so building out a solid tech foundation for you to roll your inference out on, and also they were talking about making it agnostic to which platform you're using as long as it's Kubernetes. That was an interesting push as well, and it seems like the project is very much at the 1.0 stage, but there's already some validated solutions.
Joep, I see you smiling as he's talking. What's going through that beautiful brain of yours?
So I agree with Ned. I think it's interesting that they're going for that angle, simply because that is where the money is. That is where basically everything is going to be running, and Kubernetes is the place to be. And I like how it kind of resonates and kind of vibes throughout the whole show floor. Everyone's talking about AI, but we're at a stage where we're no longer saying we do AI, but we're at a stage where people say, yeah, but we do AI, but we do observability, for instance. And so I like how observability is now a thing again. Like it always has peaks and valleys and it kind of meanders, but now observability is back, and I'd like how we keep on going through these motions.
Well, it's really mission critical. I mean, observability always matters, but as you're ramping up and scaling, especially with AI, we're talking about a lot of things going on within a system and a stack, and if you can't see what's going on, it could be pretty wild. Rob, has your experience been similar? You've been all over the place, you've gotten to talk to people, we got some briefings.
Yeah, I mean, I think-
You've had a day.
I've had a day. I've had a day.
You've had a day.
I think a lot of, I agree on the inference thing. I think that's where the money is, and that's why it makes sense. It also is, the neo-clouds are where people are going to train their models and do all of that stuff, and they're here too, but there's a handful of them. You don't need to go market to them as much. Right. But to your point on, when we were talking, like just last night, we were at Infrastructure as Code Conference, or IAC Conf Connect, and some of the conversations afterwards, like even the last question we got there was around, hey, how do I do observability, basically 4 prompts and stuff like that. I think the complexity of AI, and there are all so many moving parts, has everybody like coming to the table because everybody's freaked out. It's just, I mean, I was having another discussion just even about what are the identities these agents are going to use, and how are you going to manage and audit all the identities of an agent? So the security factors, we've had a couple of those discussions today.
Yes, we
have. I think there's just, it's one of these things that I think it's past the infrastructure Kubernetes and gotten to the AI infrastructure. A lot of that.
The whole AI conformance spec that they were pushing, 2 of the big pillars were observability and security, and I think that speaks to your point. We have these golden signals we normally observe for key metrics we're looking out for. What's my CPU utilization, what's my response times on things. Now there's a new metric we have to watch, which is the prompt and also the response. Does the user like that response? Is it a valid response? If I asked you for, I don't know, directions on how to get from point A to point B, and instead you give me directions on how to get to point C, I don't see that in my normal metrics, but that's a wrong answer, and that's a bad signal to be giving. If I do that too many times, you're going to leave my service. So we now have to include the responses as part of the whole observability stack. that's going to be tough, and people need to start instrumenting for that.
And John, there was a analyst lunch, and Jonathan came in, and basically it was funny because he was making the reviewing what he had talked about at the keynote, where we were all standing in line trying to get in, but anyway, besides the security snafus that have been going on here today, and
security hot topic these days, Rob. Whether it's
security was a hot topic. It definitely,
with your data.
They definitely had a firewall up, and we're constraining the flow of traffic into the place today. When he was talking about it, it was very interesting because I think it was a lot of exactly where you were going with that. It's like the observability and the security, but it was also, hey, we don't quite understand how we're going to get there, and part of it he brought up was VLLM and LLMD, which are not quite yet under CNCF. I have a feeling they're going to land either with CNCF or Linux Foundation somewhere.
Sure.
But, just because of the history and who owns Neural Magic now, I think that it will get steered that direction, which is great because then you start to get a center of gravity around this, but there's so many different places you have to go, I think, right now, and that, from an open source perspective, that confuses people, and it makes their lives a lot more difficult about how do they get to observability, how do they get to security on that stuff.
Well, and don't forget, like the world is circular, like everything comes back, and I think next year, or maybe even in Amsterdam for KubeCon, we're going to be talking about hardware again. Yeah. Like we've gone away from hardware, everything was cloud.
Right.
But we're now in a place where we have to consider 400 gig networking.
Right.
Because the models need stuff like that.
I am so glad you just said that, because we were just talking about that on my last segment with Google Cloud, and two things. So this hardware is back. Hardware had kind of gone into like the whisper net there for a little bit, as if all the stuff isn't running on hardware. Like, yeah, cool. The cloud is hardware. Spoiler. But the thing that was also really kind of interesting about that was, and talking to the GKE team specifically, is they're trying to be hardware agnostic. And what's really interesting about that is it's a shift, right? And that's kind of like a paradigm, like, ooh, okay, we've got to make sure that we're ready for whatever people are going to plug and play within their partnerships. And it's kind of an extension of the culture of collaboration that we've been seeing on the software side to power all this stuff with AI in particular. But I love it because I am an OG hardware nerd, and it's been a little lonely not getting to talk about it all the time. And it's nice right now because all of a sudden, especially with the inference conversation, the inference is going to happen on hardware that people are touching and doctors are doctoring with, and things are happening. But it's going to be kind of like Kubernetes and all that we do is going to be built into all this stuff in a way that's intuitive and not so like in your face or necessarily shouting that it's there, but in a way that's optimizing the performance of that solution, which is very, very exciting. I'm curious if there's any conversations that you were expecting to have that you haven't really had a lot of so far. I'll go with you, because you've been to oodles of KubeCons.
So the discussion I think hasn't happened yet is what's next after Kubernetes. Like in the before times, before Kubernetes, we would have this discussion every few years, right? What's after bare metal? What's after virtualization?
Right.
Like I'm missing that conversation, and I think that is because Kubernetes is now so ubiquitous. Everybody's using it in the data center, in the cloud, on-prem, even at the edge. Like it's everywhere. That I don't think we're ready for that discussion yet.
I think that's really good. I think that's a really good point. We had Kelsey Hightower, obviously one of the grandfathers of Kubernetes. Grandfather feels odd. He's not maybe not old enough to be
Godfather.
that. Godfather. Yeah. Sorry, Kelsey. Hopefully you're not watching. Appreciated our segment.
He's right there.
But what was fun and appropriate about our conversation is the vision of Kubernetes when it came out was to be a 20-year technology, to your point, not to be 5, 10, 15 years, but to actually be something that saw us through a couple different technological hype curves and implementation. And so I love that you brought that up, because I think instead we're at this kind of calm piece right now where everyone's like, cool, so this is what we're building with. Now let's go build that whole future. Ned, what about you?
Well, it's funny you should mention that we're in this lull, because I felt like before the AI boom hit, there was a lot of talk about WASM, WebAssembly.
I was going to bring that up actually.
And like it was getting some strong headwinds. You saw it making progress.
It was a whole moment in Amsterdam.
It was.
Oh yeah.
And I thought that was the next big technology. That was the thing that was not going to replace Kubernetes, but it was the next big thing people were going to be hyped about.
Yeah.
And potentially could replace some Kubernetes workloads in a new form. And then AI dropped like a bomb and took all the wind out of WASM's sails. That's not to say that people haven't been working on it. There has been a lot of progress made. I was talking to somebody today who's putting together an open source project around WASM and replacing container runtimes with WebAssembly instead for MCP servers. So when your MCP server needs to reach out and use a tool, instead of it reaching out to use a container, it could use a WASM module instead. It's smaller, it's more lightweight, and probably more secure. I was like, ooh, that's a great idea. But yeah, there really was that period of time where I thought it was going to be all WebAssembly all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And we moved away from that. Maybe things are getting to the point now where AI is starting to cool down and we're ready for the WebAssembly thing.
I think that's going to be really interesting. Yeah, I know you and I feel very similarly about this.
We do.
And well, to your point, I mean, I know there was WASM Day at KubeCon last time, I believe, at least in London, and then potentially even in Salt Lake, if I'm recalling correctly. I haven't seen anything about it here. Not even a whisper. I haven't even said the acronym. All day on the desk, and we've talked about.
But you were having some discussions with them. You were. I thought we talked about it yesterday, but maybe I'm.
We might have talked about the modules and the security and how tiny it is, and how it really goes in the sandbox, and you can be so prescriptive around what a WASM process can do down to syscalls, which is amazing. It also requires a lot of back-end support to get it working properly. It's very fiddly at first. And so I think they were trying to shake out that fiddliness, and then all the investment shifted to AI, and it kind of, I won't say it died in the vine, it's still there. It just needs another injection of life, I think.
Yeah, there's not a lot of fertilizer right now.
Yes, it's been scooped up by something else.
Yes.
It'll have its moment.
Well,
it shall.
Yes, it'll come back around. I think, to your point, I think it depends on what you want to put into it, and I think finding the right, I think that was always my thing with WASM was, is it going to really replace certain runtimes or not? And I think that was, now there may be reasons to do that because the ephemeral nature of it and how you can bring it to different places, and as AI gets, these AI agentic applications get built out, it may see another push in there as that.
But it's the same with serverless. Like the higher you go in the stack, the more prescriptive it gets.
Yeah.
And so the harder it gets to actually run something in there.
Yeah.
And so that's the difficulty of serverless too. Like we haven't heard much about serverless too.
Yeah.
Also because... I haven't heard anything about it, just at least speaking from here,
Because containers apparently are good enough for so many use cases. And that's what I love about Kubernetes. It's
also cost effective too. I mean, when you look at serverless, I think serverless was originally going to be cheaper than everything else and blah, blah, blah. And funny enough, serverless runs on a server. You still have to, every time you spin it up, I know.
Is there hardware involved?
There's hardware.
There might be.
But when you look at it, there's the startup penalties. Well, if I'm going to have that startup penalty, why am I tearing it down? Because then I have to go through that all. Even some of the database companies that have rebuilt their architectures on serverless, like Databricks in particular, some of the nodes that are in there are still long-lived containers, and not just the serverless. So it's not all serverless because the architecture doesn't work that way, and it can't.
Yeah. Well, no technology really replaces the previous one. It augments it for certain use cases. Like, just because Kubernetes came along didn't mean VMs went away. What do you think most of those Kubernetes clusters are using? It's all virtual machines. But we move up a layer in the stack and we add some more abstraction. There needs to be a benefit to that. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out. What is the true benefit for WebAssembly versus what we're using today to put all this additional effort into actually making it work?
Yeah, agreed.
I like that. One thing that I've noticed, I mean, you and I have been on the road a lot. We have been show to show to show, back to back to back. And everywhere else we've been talking, it's been a lot about agentic. And it's interesting to me here, and this is one of the reasons I love the open source community, is they don't talk about hypothetical. They talk about what's really happening and what we're really building today. And it's been refreshing. Of course, there's some GKE announcements about agentic, plenty of things in the news, but the conversations have been much more around how we're optimizing workloads, how we're doing inference, to your point. It's been around this, how are we making sure that this foundation that we're making with this first ramp up of AI, not first ramp up, but you know what I mean, more ubiquitous adoption of AI, that this is going to be strong enough to handle when we add the layer of agentic that creates both chaos, complexity, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's kind of nice, because I just love that we can really talk about things that are real, and we're not listening to, I say this with love as a consultant, consultants talking about, you know, the 60,000 agents that we've deployed. You're forcing your employees to use them, and it's really a chatbot. Like, is that agentic? I don't know. Like, I mean, sure, I guess, but not in a way that applies. So I think for me, it's been really refreshing to hear about the fine tuning, to hear about the power optimization, to hear about how we're really making sure that this is the right stable table for us to then go dance on with all our friends and make all the cool solutions. Last question for you, gentlemen. What are you most excited to dive into more here on day 2? Some of the conversations, there's dinners, there's events. Rob, I'll start with you.
Agentic.
Yeah. How did I know I could count on you to say something smart like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, again, I think there's a lot still going on. I think there's, and I brought this up, you know, how we talk about agent being the wrong name. And
yes, that's why we love the genies.
Genies, and
I use genies.
Well, we called it buddy. I called it buddy last night, and I'm like, you look at it and go, I think people haven't figured out the use cases for it yet, per se. Not everybody, and it's not widely, and the ROI still isn't there for a lot of it.
No one knows what they're doing.
And I think, so we're early days with that, but I think to your point about hardening the infrastructure underneath it, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Again, observability, security, I think the stuff identity is a massive one. I was talking to CyberArk about that earlier today in a briefing, and that was literally what we were talking about, because I'm sitting there going, my head can't wrap around, I can wrap around easy a chatbot. I can't wrap around easy something that needs credentials to go, like I'm in accounting, I can go and build a dashboard, but then Sue from marketing comes in and asks the same prompt of the same agent and doesn't get the same thing back because she doesn't have the credentials. How do you stop that where people don't, you have to build it that it understands and has a tokenized identity down to the thing. I think that will probably be, when we look at Amsterdam, I think that'll be one of the #1 things that people are talking about, because something bad's going to happen, and it's going to cause people to go,
just like gave me chills thinking about that. I'm like,
I mean, I hate to be a pessimist on that, but
no, I mean, you're not a pessimist, you're accurate.
I think
you're an analyst.
Something has to bad has to happen to really shift the power over to that.
Well, and I think, just to double down on what you just said, in terms of it being in Europe, it tends to be a community much more regulation savvy and much more aware of the risks. In America, we're kind of like, we'll just see what happens until the whole world shuts down, all the flights are grounded, and healthcare stops. But it's, well, that's just another day in the United States of America these days. But but I do think you're right about that. I think that's a really good point. What about you? What are you excited about?
I'm going to kind of follow your train of thought there. Put it in a different perspective, because I'm an ops guy at heart. Like I like hardware, I like keeping systems, operational. So what I like about this show is that is a continuing theme. Sometimes you have to look for it, sometimes it's not really there, but you have to go and dig it out. And so I'm interested in figuring out the operational aspects of all of this. Like, how do people actually keep all of this stuff running, and how to do that well? That's super interesting to me. That's going to be my next day.
Yeah, it is super interesting, and there's so many different manifestations of that on the show floor with all the different projects, all the different scalers. I mean, you can have different forms of that conversation, which is cool, which is why it's so fun to learn from this community in particular. Ned, what about you?
I'm going to borrow from that a little bit. The conversations we were having last night and today all had to do with human in the loop. AI is important, but we can't trust it. We need to have a human in the loop. And there's so many humans here, I want to talk to them and find out how they're inserting themselves into the loop to keep their AI safe. that's been my conversations today, and I want to have more of those conversations tomorrow.
I think that sounds great, and I know we are the humans in the loop.
How about yourself?
Right here. Ooh, good question. I think that I love how grounded this conversation is, but I would really love some real world examples of how this has manifested. And I've pushed some of our guests on it today, like I always do, but I know they're out there, and I know there are some cool things that are happening, and so I'm kind of hoping that tonight and tomorrow people come up and start talking to me and saying, hey, look at this thing, or look at how we applied this, or look at this like X-ray technology we can now optimize, and people can get the results way faster, and because that's the stuff that really gets me super excited. I mean, the hardware is the core of that, but the outcome is what I really care about, and I'm kind of waiting for us. I feel like we're like at the top of the roller coaster, before it starts to go down, and it's really exciting, where I'm like, come on, show people that this works, show it that it works, so that we can go whee and go down and do the whole thing, which is where we'll be, next, and less worried about the details. But yeah, if you've got those stories and you're listening, please bring them to us here on theCUBE. Ned, Joep, and Rob, I just love doing this with you. Ned, we're now friends, so
Yay.
we've crossed that chasm.
Excellent.
This has been absolutely fantastic. And thank all of you for tuning in to day one of our 3 days of coverage here at KubeCon. Quick shout out to all the veterans out there. Thank you all for your service. We appreciate you, and we see you. My name's Savannah Peterson, signing off from Atlanta, Georgia. You're watching theCUBE, the leading source for enterprise tech news.